Hello, welcome to Hotpot. I'm your host, Joney Poon, stirring the pot on Asian BIPOC mental health and wellness. Hello, everyone. Happy New Year's and welcome to the year of 2023. I'm so excited to share with you this podcast series. This has been a passion project of mine for a while now, and it is now coming to a fruition, and I get to share it with you all for this wonderful new year and new seasons of our lives. So welcome to Hotpot. We are stirring the pot on Asian BIPOC mental health and wellness. Hello, my name is Joney, and I thought to start or kickstart this series or podcast. The very first episode will be a little bit about me, why I am starting this podcast, and then you'll notice that all the other following podcast series or episodes will be with different individuals, and I'll have different lovely guests on, and you are all welcome to come join in. And I'd like to invite you to come sit whatever you're doing and listen and join in as part of the conversation, because you are a very part of this community, and carry these conversations with your friends as well and with your family members. So why I started this series is not just only based on my own personal experiences, reflections, it's also based on what I've observed in my work and also in talking with other friends and people who have their own experiences, and really truly inspired me that I was like, wow, I think there's a need of, and the time is right, not only need and timing, to share more of how we can really find liberation in connecting with authentic pieces of ourselves, whether it's through life experiences or different modalities and approaches such as therapy, traditional ones like talk therapy, or even somatic work, or through meditation or through plant medicine, whatever it is, how life has really allowed you to experience and really discover your authentic selves, and by doing so really reclaiming your own identity, and in my way and through my experience really reclaiming and learning who Joney is, and not just dictated by how I look, that I'm Asian or Chinese, because I'm more than that. I'm a human being. And so who is Joney, and how I'm more and more really connecting with those parts of myself that is not narrated and shaped by culture, by society, by what my parents have taught me, and by sharing my own stories and witnessing it and supporting others through their own healing journey and through their own unfolding expansion. I've seen so beautifully other people have been able to allow their own inner identities, their own inner selves to really shine authentically, and by doing so found liberation and reclaimed also even parts of their culture and what that means to them. Again, not shaped by external forces, but coming from within. And that's such a beautiful thing, and that's why I've created this podcast, because I want to really share that, and hopefully to plant seeds and inspire others to not only venture out to do that on their own as well, that you know that you're also not alone. Other people's experiences, I hope, are shares and also words of magic to plant these seeds of medicine for you to, invite you to do the same as well, to explore who you really are, and to really find liberation and reclaim your own identity and culture from a place of authenticity and not from external forces and what you should be. And that's why I created this podcast. And so just to share a little bit about me, I am a therapist. I do integrated therapy work. What does that even mean, right? So my first original training is music therapy. I've always been fascinated by music, by art, by expression. And from there, that I just not that I discovered, but music really allows me to really alter my conscious state of being and to really access different parts of me that is not filtered with a certain lens of expectation, and allows me to be really authentic and raw. So through that form, I've really been fascinated with like how our subconscious mind works and different altered conscious states. Before I go down that path even further, let me backtrack a little bit to my origins. So I am Chinese, identify myself mostly Chinese, and I was born in Hong Kong, and my Chinese name is Poon Chang Yan. We always say our surname first. In Cantonese is Poon Jong Yan, and in Mandarin is Pang Shuing. And I am very grateful to have experienced a life with color. Has it been easy? No. I have experienced, trauma through bullying, and not just microaggression, but like big aggression, bullying and racism. And I faced that when my parents, moved us to North America. We lived in Calgary, Alberta, in Canada for a while. And I remember during some of my early school years, kids are just in general can be mean, are mean, and mix that in the fact that I was the only Asian in the whole entire school. That didn't help, and it was hard. And not only did the kids make me feel different, unwelcomed, and didn't belong, and not accepted, it really shaped and played into my sense of identity and self-worth. It's like, who am I? I don't feel like I belong here. And I think what made matters worse was when the adults, also the teachers, were racist. Some of them were very lovely and did their best and say, when you grow up, they don't know, or some of these kids don't know better, or when you grow up, you'll understand more, and you'll be able to empathize and reflect and learn from this and not hold on to this pain. And right now I can understand you're in pain and it's hard. And that was lovely, those teachers who did do that. And there were ones that were just not very kind. And in fact, now that I think about it and I talk about it, they were prejudiced against who I was. I was different. And so when I did work up the courage to tell them what was going on, and I even took my mom a long time to get it out of me, because I would go home crying, or I would be very reluctant to go to school. And when she even brought it up to the instructor was like, I didn't notice. I didn't know that was going on. And these kids were not being coy with how they were bullying me. I mean, they were not only verbally abusive, but they were physically not nice. I got hit a few times, even shoved off a second floor. And so I cannot imagine how, in class, if kids were kicking me, how can the teacher not see it? So it's just, I guess they were trying to turn a blind eye. I don't know. I can't explain. I don't know it because I can't ask them now. And maybe it's my own biases, but I do believe that some of it was also racism because they didn't care. I could feel that I didn't belong in the way they talked to me, and they would sometimes make fun of how I talk. Not in a direct way. It's just I can tell it's like, that's not how you speak, or speak properly. I don't understand you. And it wasn't done in a kind tone either. So that's how I perceived it. And it was hard just to feel unwelcomed and to be made fun of. Even the things I ate during lunch made me feel alienated. It's like, oh, ew, she had noodles, or things that were more traditional Asian for meals. And some kids would hold their nose and make stinky faces, and that hurts because that's the environment I grew up in. That's what I knew, and that's what brought me safety and familiarity, and yet that was all questioned. So I realized, later on, that with my upbringing and also my parents' trauma and feeling displaced because they moved away to a new foreign country without their family and support and friends, their anxieties and fears also, got passed on. And so mix that with my own personal experiences and their own personal experiences and my parents' upbringing, that really shaped in some of the sense of lack of self-worth or self-trust, and belonging and acceptance. And one of the ways I realized how I cope is to keep myself, closed. I've always been friendly. In some ways, I've been very kind and empathetic because through my earlier childhood experiences, it has allowed me to really empathize with others. And through moving around, because we also moved around quite a lot during later junior high school and high school years, we moved back to Asia. And not only did I live in Hong Kong, Thailand, Indonesia, I spent most of my later high school years in Singapore. And even then, it was funny, I wasn't fully Asian then. So then I did, again, that sense of not fully being accepted and belonging was there again. So then I was like, wow, then who am I? It really starts, like I remember during my high school teen years, I really would question, it's like, who am I? And why am I so different? Why do I feel like I don't belong? And it was hard, it was difficult. And it also has led me to be more empathetic to those who always felt like outcasts or not as welcomed, and has inspired me and also shaped probably why I do the work I do now, wanting to help people and support people. And that has really shaped just most of how I show up in my work, and understanding that it really does suck. It does hurt to feel not accepted, to not feel welcomed, and to not feel valued, and to feel ostracized, or even being oppressed because, I look different or that I'm female. I've experienced that as well. And if you add all those minorities and all those differences in, it does compound. And yet, I am inspired because I feel like the more we drop into our authentic selves and not be ashamed of it, and the more we learn to trust our own sense of identity, not dictated and narrated by others, by culture, by society. It comes from a sense of purity and light. And I feel that when I can show up more like that, others around me can pick that up too, and there's that ripple effect, and it's so beautiful. Like I sense that the way others behave around me is different or shifted, or even if they don't shift their actions or behaviors, the way I respond is also different. And that's why I got into the work I do, being a therapist. If I backtrack a little bit, that was not my original plan. I originally wanted to be a doctor, and I think maybe that was also shaped from Asian family culture and dynamics, and having that wanting to feel like I'm loved through value, because by saving face and by doing all these amazing things and meeting parents' expectations of the best that they want us to be, then we are seen and valued. And so I did try down that path and discovered that that wasn't for me. I wasn't happy, I was miserable actually, in fact. And so then it wasn't until I went into like, okay, now what am I going to do with my science degree and background? I still want to help people because I still had that passion, and realized maybe the medical field is not for me. I was thinking maybe I'll be a physiotherapist. And so I actually started working at a brain injury clinic in preparation to see if that's what I wanted to do, because I didn't want it to waste more years of my life in something that I wasn't passionate about and that didn't make me happy, because I learned from that experience. And so it was when I was working at this clinic, I met a music therapist. And growing up, I love arts. I love being creative. It really allowed me to express and just tap into these different conscious states of being that allow me to feel free and to be able to express. And it was just lovely to create. Unlike most of my Asian friends, when I talked to them, my parents did not force me to learn music. I myself fell in love with it after I heard someone else play on the piano, and I was the one who begged them to let me learn. And during school, as university got more demanding, and then with med school, I just realized I had less and less time to do the arts. Even when I was younger, I was always very creative, either drawing, creating, crafting, and I did less and less of that. And maybe that's also why I became less happy and like joyful, because I wasn't able to create and express myself, not to be seen, to perform. And so yeah, I met a music therapist, and I saw the work she did, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. So I decided to go back to school and learn how to become a music therapist, learn how to use music as a tool and modality for healing, to access parts of ourselves that we become disconnected with, or we learned to not trust, whether through upbringing, life experiences. And it's such a beautiful thing. And the more I worked with how music can really access parts of our emotions, the rawness of it, the vulnerability allows us to be in, as well as how it can alter our states of subconsciousness or access it as well. It led me down into really being fascinated with altered conscious states. And then growing up, I've also been very spiritual, being Chinese and being brought up in Hong Kong for the few years, and my parents being traditionally Chinese as well. My parents are quite superstitious, in particular my mom, and that has really shaped my openness with spirituality, the metaphysical. And my grandmother practiced Buddhism, my maternal side, and she converted to Catholicism. And so when my parents, my mom in particular, was then, shifted into more of the Catholicism route as well. And then when my parents moved to North America, because Christianity and Catholicism is more practiced in North America, that's what they adapted more, and that's what they affiliate their religious and spiritual sides more, which makes sense. And back then, my grandmother, maternal side again, was very poor, and because of that, it was through missionaries and outreach program that really helped with feeding the kids and supporting some of the family basic needs. So I think that also really allowed them to build that attachment and association with Christianity and Catholicism that's helpful, that shaped in a positive light compared to what some others have experienced. And I can understand why they've really adopted that religion and that practice, because it's brought them comfort and security. And being raised in that, it has allowed me to really be more connected. I've always believed there's something bigger. I've always believed in God. I call it Gus, as I continue this spiritual journey of mine, and through different life experiences, including plant medicine, is how it has allowed me to connect with my spirituality and religion in a different way, with religion in a different way. And that's why I call it Gus. It's a short form for God, universe, source. And even in my early childhood experiences with Christianity, I found comfort in connecting with something bigger and beyond me, which the eye cannot see, and I've sensed, and I've sometimes seen where others people don't see, and that deep knowing it has brought me comfort, that peace, and yet at the same time there are certain structures of religion, especially the dogmatic ones, that never really fit for me. I've always questioned them. That I always felt like something's off, not quite right. And because I'm not believing and practicing everything I should be doing. And so then it has, and the fact that because of those beliefs, and sometimes it's really interesting. I see my mother, I've observed her do this, where she cherry picks. Like there are things like there's some superstitions that she'll practice that is not based out of Christianity for sure, and yet when we and then she chooses not to practice some things because she's like, Christians don't do that. So I'm like, oh, that doesn't make sense. And because of that rigid structure, it has also shut some parts of me down in some of my spiritual growth in my early years, because I was taught that some things were right and some things were wrong, even though deep down it didn't quite fit. And then in some ways it taught me not to trust myself, not to trust and honor what felt right for me. And it didn't mean it was harmful for others, it just didn't fit for me. And something as simple as, like, you know, when I was younger, I could sense and see and know things before they were shared with me. And I could see things around me, and when I shared it with my mom, you know, at that time, she said, oh, it's just my imagination, or just brushed it off. It was many years down later on when we visited that she said, oh, you know, sometimes I've heard things and seen things too, and your grandma does, so I know it's in the line. That gift, I guess you can call it, or that intuitive sense, is in the lineage of the women in the bloodline. And we didn't talk about it, because again, in Christianity, if you did that, it meant either you had some mental health, or you were possessed, or maybe and well, at the same time, now that I'm talking about it, my mom didn't also have the support around that too. And so she didn't know how to handle it, because when I was younger, she didn't want it to scare me with that, and didn't know how to explain what I sensed or picked up. And so, you know, she even shapes her own experiences through the Christianity or Catholic lens. Wow, my words are not forming for me today. So thanks for bearing with me as I share my story. And so, yeah, it's really interesting how that worked out, like how that box had shaped her own experience. And so when she shares about some of the voices she's heard, like for example, it's like, oh, one time I was about to clean the stove and it was really, really hot because I forgot it was on. She heard a voice saying, don't touch it. And she puts it as an angel. And I don't doubt her. To me, it does feel like that as well. And it's really interesting that she shapes it that way. And through my own different life experiences, I have expanded that I do believe that there are energetic dimensions that we can sense and pick up, but we might not always be able to see. And so I've dropped more into exploring some of that through these altered conscious states, through really discovering who I am, and then also bringing it down and grounding it and incorporating as who is Joney, right? And let's jump back forward to work. So through my spiritual, sense of always wanting to expand that side of me and feeling that connection of something bigger, and the expressiveness of music, as well as being a music therapist. Well, I went back to school, like I said, and exploring how music can really alter our conscious states, and really those frequencies, we can feel them, like something shifts in us. It has really inspired me, and someone even encouraged me to explore like other conscious states approaches through breath work and hypnotherapy. So I got into clinical hypnotherapy, but prior to that, I forgot to mention that I got into guided imagery and music. So using music to really allow access to our subconscious mind, and what images comes up from that, or sensations come up from that. So learning to really connect with our bodies and be somatically. So again, connection with the body, and learn to feel it. And that's really allowed me to grow in that fascination that then led to clinical hypnotherapy work and those altered conscious states. And then, so that was the first time I really started really working with those internal conflicts, that self-doubt, and really starting learning to really explore what does it mean to trust myself more, even if others around me can't see it or don't experience the same thing. Because just because other people don't perceive and experience the same things as I do doesn't mean it's not very real. It is very real for each of us. And so I really started exploring that, and through school and learning to be a therapist really motivated me to really start doing my own work. And within my culture, there's this safing face. So we didn't want it to say that there's something wrong with us, because to admit that there's something wrong means we're less of, we're weak, and we can bring shame to our family and dishonor our parents. And then there's this domino effect where intergenerational trauma, it's real, and not having the understanding and capacity around that. And my parents didn't know how to put it into words because they don't have the knowledge around that, and they perceive things how I early perceived, where like it's shameful to admit that there's something wrong, that we're broken, and that we're not strong. And yet it's through therapy and through my own practice as a therapist, like I practice and do the work, healing, that I really discovered there's more freedom and less rigidity. And let's fast forward that to back to like the hypnotherapy experiences. So I dived more into that work and started practicing that. And then it was through that someone else mentioned, and then science, and there was more scientific articles on the benefits of plant medicine and psychedelics and those altered conscious states. And I started doing more studying and digging that even in traditional Chinese medicine. I like practicing that, and I was brought up in that as well. There are certain herbs that will cause hallucinatory or have components that are quite psychedelic, like that is healing and has been proven and used for healing purposes. And so that has led me down into plant medicine work and really appreciating psychedelic work. And I really has allowed me to really drop into that sense of like, wow, how much more is there to discover, and how little do we know. And the more we expand into that openness, we really discover more and more parts of ourselves. And you'll probably hear more, well, not probably, you'll definitely hear more of these stories as I have different guests with each different episode of the podcast. Mix that with the different modalities of and life experiences, different therapy modalities and life experiences, as well as through plant medicine. It really emboldened me to actually really face those truths. It really allowed me to connect with my body. I didn't even realize how much I wasn't really listening and honoring my body, what it was telling me. It was giving me a lot of information. And then if I were to jump back to the spiritual side and that metaphysical, it disconnected. I learned tools to disconnect from feeling those and honoring those feelings. And so what all those different things allowed me to do is reconnect with all that, and it made me realize and emboldened me to realize that I was leading a life that kept me small, that kept me in a place of fear and comfort, and it provided me a sense of safety, but I always felt like something was missing and that there was much more. It has really shaped in the career I am in. I haven't really abandoned what I do. If anything, it's really inspired me and really allowed me to connect with more of my purpose. I'm now working more with people who are of color, who are Asian, who have similar experiences, or who have those struggles of not feeling like they belong because their parents grew up in one cultural practice and perceptions, beliefs, and they are brought up in different ones. And learning to create a harmony of that, and learning to be one with that. It's like looking at a coin. A coin has two sides, and those two sides can both exist even though they're very different. It doesn't mean they're not true. They both are true. And learning to find that harmony around that. It's like Tao. It's everything yet nothing, and it is. And it's just being with that and honoring that and loving and accepting that. And so I notice more of my work is in that purpose and wanting to really inspire and support others and give them, invite them and create space, help them create space, and provide space for them to explore that. And that has also led me to wanting to create this podcast. Every podcast, it's done in a way that it's casual with every person that I invite on. I have different guests on, as I mentioned. It's like a conversation between friends, between peers, between equals, and where we're sharing stories. So as they're sharing, you'll notice that I'll share my own stories and experiences as well. And so you get to learn more about me as well as my guests and their amazing stories. And hopefully, you're inspired to do the same. I would like to invite you, as you listen to each podcast episode, that you are part of this conversation, that you're sitting along with us, listening along and talking and sharing. And you can do so by sharing with your friends and talking with your families and starting these discussions that are really important, because what the pandemic has showed us, and through my own personal work, what has worked for a long time, the rigidity, the constructs, the expectations, the narrated of rules, by allowing and feeling and going with that flow of emotion, going with that flow of energy, it shifts and it can create different senses and different things. And we channel that energy and emotion in different ways, we can create different things and we become more expansive. I feel like I'm living life in a fuller way and more than I have been many, many years before. So would I want to go back? No, definitely not. And that's why I am creating this podcast. And so welcome. Thank you for listening to my story, and thank you for listening to the words I'm sharing, and hopefully you are inspired to stay tuned to listen to more and to listen to other stories. And I encourage and invite you to be part of this conversation, to be part of this wonderful, exciting project that I am embarking on, and to be very much part of this podcast, to allow it to grow and expand. And the more you do it, it's like a conversation. So do leave comments and feedbacks, share your stories, and even post and share with others, so that we can really start building this community of expansion and really planting those seeds of inspiration to really start discovering who each of ourselves are, if that makes sense, to really discover our own identities as our own identities, not, again, shaped by those constructs and narrated by expectations or what others or external forces, but from a place of authenticity and of a place of purity and rawness and vulnerability and amazing and awesomeness as well. So thank you for listening, and I look forward to sharing more and inviting you back to listen and be part of the conversation with us in our next episode.